All right, as I pick up the technology around me, I want to thank everybody for being here today, and I want to thank all the organizations involved to put this event together and bring these topics to light that we've been talking about in our circles for many years, but really haven't formally addressed. And I'm really speaking specifically about underwater archaeological sites with our offshore, but also in riverine environments as well. As I work for Ecology and Environment. I'm based out of Buffalo, New York, and most of the work that we've been doing since 2007 and 2008 has been governmental contracts, working with the Navy and other groups. In environmental impact statements and those types of documents, getting the permitting processes out of the way so projects can get underway. We have been following the Council for Environmental Quality's guidance. It came out in 2010. Basically a draft format or rules for us to follow as we studied greenhouse gas emissions. But we have been involved with that, with the changes in these protocols and approaches for numerous years now. And now that in 2014, when they revised that draft and really made some important changes and are involved with the NEPA process, greenhouse gas emissions and our analysis on carbon sinks became more and more a part of the documents that we were producing, and primarily associated with the conservation and protection of environmental habitats. But there really wasn't that much on cultural resources and the protection of cultural resource sites, within inundated or submerged environments. Have you guys ever seen the movie The Life of Pi and the symbolism in that? It's just totally amazing to me. I had to go back and watch it several times. But the ocean, really proved to be one of the primary factors, in this story. And there's no way in which we really can control it. We can put a lot of plans in place. But the sea, the ocean, the water of this planet is going to do what it wants to do in the end. And so what our job is to find out ways to extract the information we need and then let nature run its course. This map of the southern U.S. Put together by the Geological Society, I know you guys have seen it. It's quite dramatic. But it does show the changes from the Holocene, Pleistocene transition all the way up into what our future could look like for this country. And of course, I showed this map to my mother, and having grown up in southern Georgia, she breathed quite a sigh of relief because she thought that it looked like to her that the family farm is situated where it'll be beachfront property one day. My grandfather, who was sheriff of Seminole County, Florida, from 1952 to 1968, always claimed that was the scenario, that we just needed to hold on to that old farm, and if we held on to it long enough, it might pay for itself in the end. Started this research, I wanted to see what's really been going on out there in regards to the protection of offshore sites in the face of climate change. And I don't know about a lot of you, but the term climate change in my business has been sort of a cuss word or a dirty word. You really don't talk about it or use it. But I'm glad to see that things are starting to change, and a lot of these organizations and governmental agencies are starting to accept the fact that yes, the polar ice caps are melting and the seawater level is rising. But looking at UNESCO, they're primarily have gone out and preserved these World Heritage Sites, but most of them are environmental related, not so much cultural resource protection. related as far as their research and the programs that they're putting into place. Looked at the European Union initiatives. There are several projects that have been going on over the last decade or so. Some of them that really do play a huge role, or will play a huge role, in the effects of climate change on offshore archaeological sites. And I'll get into a little bit more detail as this presentation moves forward. But I did want to list these projects in this presentation so you guys, when you have your own copies, can go back and Google and really find out what type of work is going on out there. But our European neighbors are really starting to do a really good job. BOEM, or the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, we work a lot with their guidelines for the offshore contracts that I deal with, which is oil and gas, renewable energy, and associated with the NEPA process in Section 106. But again, even though BOEM is very concerned about the protection of cultural resources, and the guidelines and the protocols that we initiate with our offshore surveys are pretty stringent. They're not really, or they haven't recently addressed climate change and the impacts of those cultural resources and the type of development that are going to be going on offshore, in the future. Not just our immediate future, but long term. All right, for this I identified 7 broad effects for climate change within our oceans, and how those effects will impact us, and how we go about doing our jobs. Melting of the poles, rising sea levels, warmer oceans, greater storm strength and occurrence, which is very important to offshore environments and the stability of archaeological sites. Changes in the major current systems, which I'll go into detail, ocean acidification, and then lastly, human adaptation. And that's something that really hasn't been addressed very much, but the human animal, going about its processes, it's always going to do whatever it can to protect itself, like anything else on the planet. And so I think it's now's the time to address some of the concerns that they might have as well. Randy hit on this earlier, did a great job, but Arctic amplification, which really directly goes back to what he was telling you, the acceleration of the warming trend, the fact that 93% more solar radiation is absorbed by the ocean or the melting ice than is protected by the ice that is there, which tends to reflect solar radiation rather than absorb it. So the release of these carbon emissions and these elements into our atmosphere, we've initiated a process of change. But as Randy was saying, we have really started to speed up that change. And we may continue to see effects from this process in our lifetime. The melting of the poles leads to is directly related to sea level rise, and there are a lot of figures out there about the rate of rise and how much of the land mass will be absorbed by the oceans over various periods of time. 2050, 2095, and 2100, just meaning out a lot of the information and percentages that are out there. Kind of gives you, or for this presentation, it gives a pretty good idea of what we can really expect as far as the loss of our coast. But by 2100, we've got heights could reach about 74.8 inches, or 6 feet or so. That really, in real terms, my eyes will be peeking up just above the water, which I could probably tread for a while, but hopefully I'd seek some higher ground. A lot of the work that we do modeling for the Navy, we look at the impacts basically with tidal movement. Any high tide or point of high tide as that changes. As far as the Navy is concerned, that land is rendered useless. And so we're looking at ways to help them to develop strategies and protocols to protect the coastal installations that are currently in place. And what's interesting with this diagram is that as you see what we have today, this is our active area. This is where our waves and a lot of energy is expended along the coastline. As that water level rises, that energy level changes and moves farther and farther inland. And that's going to have a direct effect on archaeological sites offshore as these waters rise, but also future underwater archaeological sites, because what we're working to try to protect is going to fall into my area of interest directly, because it's going to be, we're going to have to use underwater archaeological techniques to monitor them and further record them. But what do the effects of sea level rise have on somebody like me, or somebody like me, for that contracts out work to be done offshore for various projects? With the sea level rise, you're going to have to take into account that there's going to be an incremental reduction of time a diver can spend underwater without having to take into consideration decompression stops. And what does that really matter? But it eats into time. And with these contracts and restraints that we're put under to go out and get the data, get it back in, get the reports done, and get it back out to the client so the correct permit could be submitted. We're talking money. And so, if you look at it, with a 20% increase in diving depth, you've got a 32% decrease in running non-decompression dives. Large wave activity, as that moves closer into shore, it's going to mess up visibility. How many of you are scuba divers? I'm back down in Florida, so it's going to see a lot of hands. Nobody likes to dive in low visibility. And underwater archaeologists have a hard time doing their job in zero visibility environments. Worked on a steamboat wreck in the Swanee River years ago with the Bureau, and me and Jim Dunbar and Bob Vickery were out there, and gosh, the Swanee River was just totally, it's silted out. And we had these sturgeons that were bigger than I was that were bumping into us, in the midst of all of that as we were trying to do our work. But gosh, it really posed, quite a few challenges for us. And that was probably the worst case scenario of working in zero visibility conditions that I've had. We had these 1,000-watt snooper lights that we ran in from shore that just barely, cut through it and slowed us down quite a bit. Another problem we could see, upper coastal sediments eroding into these archaeologically sensitive sites that could, cause a chemical imbalance and could lead to quicker degradation of the material that's found in them. Warmer oceans. Growing up in the South and working in the Southeast on, sites and having to jump in the water, and now, living up in Buffalo, New York, dealing with the huge temperature changes up there, the thought of warmer oceans sounds pretty good to me. I hate donning a dry suit, but the negative impacts of that is that we could see, erosion in shallow water context enhance or increase, where currently they're pretty stable. Warm water, and that's tidal energy that I've got up there, is associated with storms. The next concern that we would have would be the migration of wood-eating mollusks or shipworms. That whenever we have a archaeological site, say a wooden ship that has been sitting stable, beneath the sediments or sand for many, many years. It's kind of locked away from a lot of the harmful organisms that are out there that can destroy it. But, as more and more species, or the species increases, storm activity exposes them to them, we could see a greater loss or percentage of loss to sensitive materials within these sites due to these little critters. But there are several species of this odd little mollusk, and they have been wreaking havoc in maritime environments since there were maritime environments. Greater storm strength and occurrence. I got to thinking about that, and Randy, really hit on it as far as the intense activity that our offshore and our coastal areas are going to be subject to. And I'm not being a Dr. Doom either, but if the warmer oceans and the changing climate do initiate more frequent and more intense storms, it only stands to reason that increased activity is going to have a harder or more direct effect on the very sites that we're currently working with and trying to protect and gain the knowledge from that we need. But I've put several points up here for you to look at in detail a little later. But when you think about as the shorelines are starting to erode, we've got foreign material that's going to collapse into an underwater environment. Well, it could be bridge piers, it could be fragments of bridge piers, it could be sections of asphalt roadways. Under the right conditions and agitated in the right way with the right natural forces, those things could actually be like pile drivers, or really have an increase or cause an increased destructive force to sites along the coastline and off. I mentioned contamination of the the ocean environment from oil and gas. If we've got stronger storms, we do have an occasional spill from time to time. We had a little one associated with BP not too long ago. But we're going to have this introduction of chemicals and materials into these environments could increase the rate of decay and could pose problems on the extraction of data in the future. And it's something that really needs to be looked at more in the future, or today for the future. I did put up here increased surges of salt water into fragile freshwater ecosystems. All right, this isn't going to happen overnight, but as our tidal surges reach farther inland, and that salt water eventually reaches to a point of where it's going to stay, you're going to have new organisms that are going to be attacking features within archaeological sites, underwater archaeological sites, say the Page Ladson site, or that haven't been subject to these types of forces. We could see a higher rate of decay. They're going to lose a level of stability. So I think that we need to really look at when we look at environmental change, look closer of how the elements of that change are going to impact the materials they come in contact with. Okay, salt water is quite rough in a freshwater environment. Not only do native species, fish, and those types of things die and are replaced by new, I think that on a smaller and smaller level, the microbiological level, that we're going to see impacts that take hold and change the type of data that we're going to be able to extract from these sites in the future. Looking at the wave action and the storms, this is very colorful, and I thought it was a good transition from the last slide. But it gives you an idea of the type of accelerated forces, these currents that we have taking place every day. It gives you an idea visually of how those currents sped up with more frequent storm activity would actually serve just like an osterizer or cause an osterizing effect to, wipe out not only our coastlines and prepare them for their new environment as seafloor, but just we'll be able to monitor the rate of destruction of that coastline, within those environments to help plan, a strategy to preserve our underwater resources. Because if you've got a shipwreck and it's going to, just like our Mr. Burkhart was telling us, the remains could be scattered hundreds of miles away. And of course, luckily, and I learned quite a lot from his research, he is developing ways for those materials and those elements of these archaeological sites to be monitored. I think that's going to be tremendously important, as the years progress forward and the elements of these sensitive sites are scattered at a much higher rate. And I think monitoring these sites, monitoring dispersal of these sites will be very important as as the Earth churns and makes way for a new era. Changes in the major currents, I think, is something that we need to think about. As the currents change, it's directly tied to the climate and weather patterns. But we could see increased rainfall. Future circulation patterns may become detrimental to sites as these currents shift their not direction, but shift their or change their level of intensity. I think that as these currents, in some cases, as the shoreline recedes, those currents are going to be moving in closer to our present shoreline or the new shoreline, and will have an impact on current land-based archaeological or terrestrial archaeological sites, and and increase the rate of decay within those sites. And just talking about currents, it is amazing. When I started to get into this topic and look at some of the details, how these currents charge and recharge themselves around the world, and it really gives you an idea or a better understanding of how tied in these oceans are. If you're in the Gulf of Mexico, those waters have been halfway or all the way around the world, and so currents are integral, and the study of these currents and their forces, I think, are important to archaeology. Our closest neighbor, and one of the most well-known, is the Gulf Stream. In a scenario, all right, of course, I'm sure a lot of you know that the Gulf Stream sits higher in elevation than the water around it, as it's kicking, along our coastline and then dispersing out towards the North Atlantic. As the seawater levels rise and that force continues to make its presence along our coastline, we could see that as those storms are scouring out the beaches and changing the topography from what we know it today. We could see that the current moving in closer to the landmass or the new landmass, and causing dispersal of historic sites and that type of activity. I think that that's pretty broad. I think that the impacts of that, I think, are a long way off, but maybe not. But I think as we're speaking at a very high level here, I think it's something to think about. Okay. All right, ocean acidification and the changing pH in the water. As the ocean absorbs and stores a good percentage of our carbon emissions. All right, at some point, and I think we're seeing it now, it's maxed out. Okay, so the it's changing the consistency or the chemical balance in the oceans, and could lead to higher rates of acidification, which acid, if you've ever conducted a science experiment on calcium, whether you're thinking about our karst topography here in Florida, or on metal. Acid eats away things and just dissolves it. So if we're looking at the eventual rise in acidification within our offshore environments, we're also going to see a possible increase of the rate of decay on the objects that it comes into contact with. Okay, so that could be wood, but it also could involve numerous iron-hulled ships, World War II submarines that didn't make it through the final phases of World War II, that we have a nice collection of in the Gulf of Mexico and spots along our Atlantic coast. We could see tremendous changes in sites such as this, which today I think is important to building our strategy to try to curb or extract the data we need from them, and build ways to slow it down if possible. The last thing I wanted to talk about is human adaptation. As the shorelines come in, the human animal is going to want to maintain its presence along the coastline. All right, where our last speaker said that a tremendous amount of archaeological sites, and as we know, are located. Okay, as that coastline comes in, the number of underwater archaeological sites are going to increase, as I stated a few minutes ago, because a lot of our terrestrial sites are going to sink beneath the waterline. All right, but as man works to preserve this presence along the coast, he is going to need to modify or adapt that environment to meet his needs. And that involves keeping ports active, which would involve dredging, which would involve a tremendous amount of terraforming activity. It would also involve the construction of levees and buffers to curb the new storm surges that are affecting that environment. He's also going to have to develop new coastal complexes for industry. And there's going to be a need to find locations to put those operations. The population, as the water comes in and the coastline recedes, our population is going to continue to grow. So where are you going to put that population? Well, if you've got less landmass to house that population, then perhaps you'll be looking for ways to put that population in newer developed offshore environments. And you can see the architect's rendering here of how the coastline can be modified, and we see in our era today of how we stabilize and strengthen our coastal environments to aid in development. That would only increase, or it could increase. So there's going to be a chance that there's going to be a tremendous amount of, or more encroachment on these sites that we're documenting today. Not only our shell mounds and our prehistoric sites, our offshore sites like Rayhole Springs that we found, Jim Dunbar has found evidence of paleo activity. We're going to see a lot more or newer impacts on these that we currently don't recognize today. So with the last slide, it's not an ending slide, but it's a beginning slide, because as far from my perspective, the protection of existing offshore sites, submerged sites, now is the time to develop strategies, to do research, to find ways to determine the type of impacts that these sites will be subjected to. Whether some of these ideas that I've proposed here hold water, pun intended, or don't. But now's the time to think about it. Some suggestions that I've thought about, we could, as Randy did, we've got to talk about climate change. But we've got to talk about climate change more in the cultural resource area or field. It should become just commonplace as we work to develop these ideas and test these ideas and build strategies that we'll hopefully work to preserve this data that is so integral to develop an understanding of where our society has been and where our society is going. So we need to look at management plans and planning. We have a good idea, as the previous presenters have shown you, that we know where a lot of these archaeological sites are located on our coast, Florida in particular. We have models that have been designed to show where the highest levels of activity will be as those water levels rise. So through a process of deduction, we can figure out where the highest level of energy will be and what sites will be subject to the larger degree of destruction. And so we can, with that knowledge, we can perhaps establish or look at mitigation policies where we can determine in that spray of archaeological sites what are most important to our, or which have, and I used heritage value. Okay? What sites would cause us to lose the most? And from that, we can develop mitigation strategies to focus our attention and the excavation and assessment of data of these sites. And I hate to say that, because it's like weighing out two objects and then tossing one over the rail and keeping the one you got. But then you start thinking about the one you tossed over the rail, should you have held on to that instead? But these are the challenges that we're going to be faced with. Not only within the academic arena, but also in the consultant, the private sector, and governmental sectors as well. Now's the time to look at engineering, technology, design. And we've, our last speaker hit on that with the various strategies that have been implemented to preserve the integrity of the shale mount. Some work for now, but won't work very well in the future or may cause more problems. But those are the types of things that are very important that we need to keep in place, to keep experimenting, to keep developing new ideas, to finally hit a point at some time in the future where we'll reach a level of stabilization so these sites could be interpreted by a new generation, and the data that hopefully we've preserved could also be interpreted to answer the questions we have in a new generation. Okay. So anyway, that's pretty much the most of what I've got to say. Like I say, I've just started getting really into this subject and looking at impacts to offshore sites, looking at these geologic and climatology related models. I think it's something that all of us can pick up and work on a little bit ourselves as professionals in the field, and just use this PowerPoint and our discussions this weekend to develop new pathways for the future. So that's the most of it, and I look forward to any questions afterwards on it. But thank you.